After a decade of making a name for himself as Daniel Bryan in the WWE, Bryan Danielson has jumped to All Elite Wrestling. The pro wrestling superstar sat down with 6ABC in Philadelphia to discuss the big move to AEW and what's next for the American Dragon.
Once you get to WWE, like when I first started, the Philly crowds would be like more intense and that sort of thing. But then it kind of stopped being like that. And I don't know. I'll be interested to see how it is for AEW, because AEW fans tend to be like wrestling fans. They love and wrestling, like wrestling fans, wrestling fans. That, like, when I would come and do independent shows in Philadelphia, like they were some of the best and some of the worst, right? If you didn't have a good match, they were some of the worst. But I'm a big Seahawks fan, right? And my wife's a big Eagles fan. And we were wanting at one point to go to a Seahawks Eagles game in Philadelphia. It was there. And she's like, "You do realize you can't come here with a Seahawks jersey?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" I mean, that happens. We went to a Phoenix Cardinals game where the Seahawks wrestled the Cardinals and the Arizona Cardinals. And I wore Seahawks stuff. And there were, like, I would say 15% of the crowd was wearing Seahawks stuff, right? It's like, no, you just can't do that in Philadelphia. It's like, it's not safe. But I think that's the unique nature of Philadelphia crowds in general. And this is one of the things that drew me to AEW and why I kind of wanted to come to AEW, is that AEW is like a wrestling first company. It's a wrestling company for wrestling fans. So if you're a wrestling fan, and sometimes WWE is more just based on general entertainment, they want to reach as many casual viewers as possible. Where I think AEW is like, hey, if you love wrestling, here's this. But also, like, even if you're not a wrestling fan, we're putting on wrestling, and the wrestling itself is going to bring you in. You know what I mean? And I think that's one of the really unique things about AEW. If you were to do a comparison of the two, like just watching the shows, you'll see that there's a lot more wrestling in the 2 hours of Dynamite than there is even in a 3-hour Raw. And sometimes there's more wrestling on an AEW Dynamite show than there is in Raw and SmackDown combined, And so it's like, so that's one of the things that drew me to it, because as a fan, I mean, when I was in high school, everybody loved The Rock and Steve Austin. They were my least favorite people because all they did was talk. So I like the wrestlers. It's interesting because, like, for different moments in my career, I can close my eyes and I can feel it all over again, right? And one of the things that I try to do to reinforce that is meditating shortly after I have an incredible experience, right? So that you can just feel the sensation, because it doesn't stop once you go out there, right? You go out there and you come back and you're still buzzing, right? You're still like got this feeling, right? And so AW hit me and Adam Cole in like a trailer, right? And so it was like we were in this trailer, and then Adam Cole left with Britt Baker, right? So he went and did something else. I went back into the trailer for a little bit. I was just there by myself, and so now, like, I can close my eyes and it's just weird. It just feels like a tingling sensation, like just an energy coursing through your body. And that's one of the things, I don't know. I just feel like I think that's one of the reasons why I love wrestling, is the energy that you get from the crowd. And then when there's massive energy like that, it's like, it's unbelievable. I also think, because I've been to wrestling shows as a fan where that's a thing, I think that's one of the things too. That's one of the things why it's so fun to come to a wrestling show, or why it's so fun to go to a football game when your team is winning and you're with thousands of other people and the energy is just flowing and you can feel it. If you just close your eyes, you feel it coursing through your body. And so, yeah, that's like, I've been really lucky throughout my career to have some really cool moments that if I stop and can quiet my mind and close my eyes, I can like feel the chills all over again. And All Out was one of those moments. So one of the things that I think, it like, as I'm out there a lot of times and the crowd is going crazy, and that was a very specific, I think, when you look back on like favorite matches, it's hard because there's a recency bias, but it feels like it feels like my favorite experience in a match. My favorite experience before might have been wrestling Kofi Kingston at WrestleMania. But I think that may have topped it. But one of the things that I think in these moments where fans are just super into something is that how lucky am I to be doing this thing that I love with this incredible reaction? Because I haven't talked to CM Punk about it in years, but CM Punk and I wrestled each other. I think it was in like 2004, 2005 at this little promotion in Florida in front of 75 people. And we wrestled for like 45 minutes, right? So we're out there in front of so few people and it's so quiet and you could just hear the people. Like the guys weren't even talking. They weren't even like booing us. It's a guy sitting in the front row chatting to his friend and he just goes, "These guys aren't very good, are they?" The guy's like, "No, not really." It's not even booing. They're just talking to each other, but we can hear it, right? That's such a deflating experience as opposed to having this experience where fans are excited to just see you tie up, right? Like that's so yeah, gratitude is what it feels like. So it just felt it's weird, people, there's a decent amount of tribalism in our culture today where it's like people are if you're, say, politically, if you're right, everything on the left is bad. If you're left, everything on the right is bad. And same thing with wrestling. There's WWE fans who like, and they would the worst ones would be like sending death threats to me on Instagram, or not death threats, but like, "I hope you die," or "I hope your son dies," or something like that. But that's a small minority. I think wrestling fans for the most part are great people and great humans. But what it does is it tells you it's kind of like conspiracy theories. The really bad conspiracy theories, so like flat earth or something like that. It's like, you don't listen to the flat earthers. Why do they distrust? The issue is distrust, right? They don't have a trust. So the most hardcore of these people who are saying these horrible things, well, they're mad. Why are they mad? Well, because we supported you for years and years, and we're the ones who pushed you to this level. And we feel like you've betrayed us, or we feel like you've left us, and that sort of thing. And I also, from a personal standpoint, like never got a chance to say goodbye to a lot of people. A lot of people didn't even know it was my last day. I didn't know if I was going to go back or not, right? Like my contract was up. Most people in the company didn't know my contract was up that day, except for a handful of people. And I didn't know if I was going to come back. I didn't know if I was going to go to AEW. I didn't know if I was going to kind of stop wrestling for a while. So, so there was never really a chance to say goodbye. And I also just kind of wanted to express the gratitude that I have, not just for the fans of WWE who pushed me to such a high level, but also for the people in WWE. And I mean, you have to understand, like, it's everybody, right? So it's like the catering people who, when I came in as a vegan, nobody else was a vegan on the roster, and would make me my own food every week. They just they make this, you come, you shovel food on a plate and all that kind of stuff. But they took the time to make me extra food. Like, hey, here's something for you. And this is before I main evented WrestleMania. This is when I was barely on TV. They would still make me food, right? So it's like, it's the creative team, like Ryan Callahan. They asked me to be part of the creative team a little bit. And it's the conversations with Ryan Callahan where sometimes we'd be talking for an hour about the show. Sometimes we'd be talking for 30 minutes about the show and for 90 minutes about other stuff, and like them just welcoming me in with open arms. It's the other wrestlers, you know what I mean? And so it's like, so there's so many people that you don't get a chance to say like, hey, thank you. Like, these past 11 years were awesome. And it's thanks to a lot of you. It was really, so my contract was coming up, and my contract with WWE was coming up, and Brie and I thought when I signed that contract, we're like, okay, after this, I'm going to be kind of done. right? And then and I told them before the pandemic started, I said, like, okay, we've got a little over a year left on my contract. And I'm going to kind of be done being a full-time wrestler. So let's use this next year and a half or whatever it is that we have for me, and use it to build as many stars as possible, or whatever. What's the most effective way I can be of use? But then I started really re-loving wrestling during the pandemic again. Like empty arena wrestling, like, reignited my love for wrestling. To me, it was such a unique challenge. Like, it was like, oh my gosh. And when we were in the performance center, we were in the WWE Performance Center, there was no people, there was no extra audio, there was no crowd sweetening, there was nothing. And I loved it because it was such a unique challenge as far as like, whoa, what even is wrestling? How do you even present this? And then, some people just do their same old thing, and whatever it is, like, clearly doesn't work with no crowd. And so, like, it made me look at wrestling differently. It challenged me. It was a lot of fun. And then but then, my daughter's going into preschool, and I was just like, you know what, maybe it's just time for me to just be a dad. I had all these conflicting ideas about what I wanted out of my life. So and then kind of settled on, like, I thought 40 was going to be like the tipping point where I was just like, okay, physically I won't be able to do what I want to be able to do. Turns out I'm 40 and I feel great. So I mean, and having to retire. So I was kind of forced to retire, but that was, it wasn't entirely based on my medical history. It was also based on me lying about my medical history, which is I really try to be truthful in most things, but one of the things that I was not honest about with WWE, and you have to understand their point of view on it, is that, like, I lied about certain things about my health to get in the door, right? And then all of a sudden they find out these things. Let's see, when is it? It's 6 years after they sign me, and they're like, oh my, like, it's a Pandora's box of like, oh my goodness. And so it's like, so it wasn't just my medical history. It was also, it was the line about the medical history. And then, then you have to reestablish trust, and then all these different things. And so, so yeah, that's, but yeah, it is different since I've come back from from being retired, because it's honestly felt like it's a blessing every time I'm able to go out there. Like, I don't get nervous before I wrestle anymore. And I was trained by Shawn Michaels, and Shawn Michaels said, like, when you stop getting nervous before you go out there, that's when you need to quit. And I was like, well, I don't know. I feel like I'm having more fun than ever, and I don't get nervous. So maybe that's not the case. I think the biggest change is from a wrestler standpoint, and how other wrestlers is the focus on health amongst wrestlers, and the decreased drug use, and all those, like, when it comes to, like, steroids, painkillers, all that kind of stuff. You look at, like, if you look at AEW, I don't think Kenny Omega drinks, or doesn't drink very much. I don't think the Young Bucks drink very much. CM Punk is straight edge. I've never drank in my life, right? You have, like, all these top guys who not only do they not do steroids and not do painkillers or whatever it is, they don't even drink, right? And so it's like, and you've got, and obviously there's nothing wrong with drinking, but that's a huge culture shift from what wrestling was. And I think a lot of us saw the decline of past wrestlers and the early deaths and all that kind of stuff. We're like, we don't want to be that, right? We want to, like, you talk to a lot of the guys, and a lot of them, now have kids and all that kind of stuff. You talk to them, and what their goals are is, they're like, we want to be healthy, not only healthy dads, but we want to be healthy grandparents. We want to be like all those sorts of things. So that's a major culture shift, and it's a major culture shift in the sense of, like, how we take care of ourselves. Like, you see guys, when I first got into wrestling, you're like, okay, time to go out there, do a couple squats, and then you just go out there and you wrestle. Well, no, I mean, now, like, it takes me, I'll start warming up an hour before my match. And it's like, but you see the same thing in the NFL. You say the same thing in the NBA. That's why Tom Brady is able to perform at such a high level, or LeBron James is able to perform at such a high level at 37 years old, right? We're all taking care of our bodies and our minds better so that we, one, that we last longer, but two, so that we're healthier when we're done wrestling.